At 11:47 p.m., Daniel Mercer was driving home through rural Pennsylvania. He had spent the entire evening working in Harrisburg, and all he wanted was to get home. Rain covered the windshield as his headlights cut through the darkness. Then his GPS suggested a shortcut, a narrow road through the forest. Daniel had never seen the road before, but the GPS promised it would save him almost 30 minutes. So he turned onto it. Within seconds, tall pine trees surrounded his car. The farther he drove, the darker the road became. Then his phone lost service. The GPS screen went black. Daniel didn't know it yet, but he had just entered a road that wasn't supposed to exist. About 10 minutes later, Daniel noticed an old wooden sign beside the road. It read, 17. He drove past it. 5 minutes later, the same sign appeared again. Daniel frowned. He continued driving. Another 5 minutes passed. Then he saw it again. 17. The same broken branch hung above it. The same dark stain covered the wooden post. Daniel slowed down. Something was wrong. He stopped the car and looked around. The rain was falling heavily, but suddenly the forest became completely silent. No wind. No insects. Nothing. Then Daniel heard 3 quiet knocks against his passenger side window. He slowly turned his head. There was nobody outside. Daniel started the engine again. He tried to convince himself that the knocking had come from a tree branch, but there were no branches near the window. He reached for his phone. No signal. Then another knock came. This time, from the back of the car. Daniel stared at the rearview mirror. The back seat was empty. He slowly looked toward the passenger seat. Nothing. Then he heard breathing. Very close. Daniel froze. A faint whisper came from somewhere behind him. "Don't turn around." Daniel's hands tightened around the steering wheel. He didn't move. The whisper came again. "Whatever you hear, don't look." Daniel finally forced himself to look forward. A woman was standing in the middle of the road. She wore a long gray coat. Her dark hair completely covered her face. Daniel stopped the car. He rolled down his window slightly. "Ma'am, are you okay?" The woman didn't answer. She didn't move. Daniel opened his door. "Do you need help?" Slowly, the woman raised one hand. Then she pointed behind him. Daniel looked into his rearview mirror. There was nothing there. He looked back at the road. The woman had disappeared. Daniel immediately pulled the door shut. He stared through the windshield. The road ahead was completely empty. Then the whisper came from the back seat again. "Don't follow her." Daniel stepped on the accelerator. He wanted to get away from the forest as quickly as possible, but after several minutes, the road began to look familiar. The same trees, the same curve, the same broken branch. Then he saw it. Mile marker 17. Again. Daniel slammed on the brakes. He had been driving for nearly 20 minutes, but somehow he was back at the exact same place. His phone suddenly came alive. The radio switched on by itself. Static filled the car. Then a man's voice came through. October 14th, 1998. Daniel stared at the radio. The voice continued. "Vehicle found abandoned near mile 17. The radio went silent. Then something whispered from the darkness behind him. "That's where they found us." Daniel drove forward again. Eventually, the trees opened into a small clearing. An old building stood between the trees. It looked like a forgotten forest ranger station. The windows were broken. The wooden walls were covered with moss. A faded sign above the entrance read, "Pine Creek Forest Service." Daniel remembered hearing about the place from his grandfather. Years ago, 3 hikers had disappeared somewhere near this forest. The disappearances were never solved. Daniel looked at his phone. 12:03 a.m. Suddenly, his headlights flickered. Once. Twice. Then they went out. The forest became completely dark. Daniel looked toward the abandoned station. A single yellow light had appeared inside, and behind one of the windows, someone was standing there. Daniel grabbed his flashlight and stepped out of the car. The rain had almost stopped. He walked toward the station. The front door was slightly open. He pushed it. It slowly creaked inward. Inside, everything was covered in dust. Broken chairs lay against the walls. Old maps hung from rusty nails. Cobwebs covered the corners of the ceiling. It looked as though nobody had entered the building for decades. Daniel moved his flashlight across the room. Then something caught his attention. An old wooden desk stood in the corner. On top of it was a leather-covered book. Daniel walked toward it. He didn't know why, but something told him the book was waiting for him. Daniel opened the leather book. It was an old ranger logbook. The first pages contained ordinary reports: lost hikers, storm damage, broken equipment. Then he reached October 14th, 1998. The handwriting suddenly became shaky. One sentence caught his attention. 3 people missing near mile 17. Daniel turned the page. Another sentence had been written underneath. We can hear them outside. He stopped. Daniel turned another page. The final entry contained only one sentence. If someone finds this book, don't follow the voices. Daniel stared at the words. Then he heard someone outside. A woman's voice. Daniel? He recognized it immediately. It was his mother, but his mother had been dead for 6 years. The voice came again. Daniel, come outside. Daniel stepped away from the door. He searched the station instead. Near the back wall, he discovered an old wooden box. Inside were several photographs. The first showed 3 young hikers standing together, the same 3 people mentioned in the logbook. Another photograph showed an old ranger standing beside the forest road. Daniel looked closer. Something dark stood between the trees behind the ranger. A figure, almost human. Daniel turned the photograph over. A date was written on the back. October 14th, 1998. His hands began to shake. Then he noticed another photograph underneath it. He slowly pulled it out, and his blood ran cold. The photograph showed mile marker 17, the same wooden sign, the same forest, the same broken branch, but someone was standing beside the marker. Daniel. It was Daniel himself. He was wearing the exact same dark green jacket, the same black shirt, the same jeans. The photograph looked old, very old. Daniel stared at it in disbelief. There was no way he could be in a photograph from 1998. He looked at the date. October 14th, 1998. Daniel dropped the photograph. No. Then he noticed something else. The Daniel in the photograph wasn't looking at the camera. He was looking directly into the forest, as if he was afraid of something standing just outside the frame. Daniel stepped backward. His flashlight flickered. He looked toward the wall. Something had been carved into the old wooden boards. He moved closer. The words were deep and uneven. The road opens at 12:17. Daniel looked at his watch. 12:17 a.m. He stepped backward. The lights inside the station suddenly came on. Every broken window reflected the room behind him. Daniel looked at the glass. His reflection was standing there. But behind his reflection, 3 figures were standing in the darkness. Daniel slowly turned around. Nothing. He looked back at the window. The figures were still there. Only now, they were much closer. Daniel stared at the window. 3 people stood outside. They were completely motionless. Their faces were pale. Their clothes looked old and soaked from the rain. Daniel recognized them. They were the 3 missing hikers from the photographs. One of them slowly raised a hand. Daniel stepped backward. The figure placed its hand against the glass. Then another figure appeared behind it. And another. All 3 were staring directly at Daniel. Their eyes were completely black. Daniel ran toward the door, but before he reached it, The lights went out. When they came back on, the three figures were gone. Only a wet handprint remained on the window. The station door suddenly opened by itself. Daniel looked outside. The forest was gone. There was no clearing, no trees, no ranger station parking area. Instead, an endless black road stretched into thick fog. Daniel looked back at his car. It had disappeared. He grabbed his phone. The signal had returned. Hundreds of notifications appeared. Missed calls, old messages, unknown numbers. Then a new message appeared. The sender was listed as Daniel Mercer. Daniel opened it. The message contained only one sentence. "Don't take the road home." Daniel looked up. The woman in the gray coat was standing at the end of the road. She slowly turned toward him. The woman walked closer. Behind her were the three missing hikers. Daniel couldn't move. The woman stopped several feet away. Her hair slowly moved away from her face. Her skin was pale. Her eyes were completely black. Daniel whispered, "Who are you?" The woman smiled. "We're the people who tried to leave." Daniel looked behind them. There was no forest anymore, only the endless road. The woman pointed toward the darkness. "You came looking for a way home." Daniel shook his head. "I just want to leave." The woman smiled again. "So did we." Then the three hikers stepped aside, and something enormous moved in the fog behind them. The next morning, at 7:32 a.m., a Pennsylvania state trooper discovered an abandoned car near the forest road. The driver's door was open. The engine was still running. The headlights were still on. But Daniel was nowhere to be found. There was no blood, no broken glass, no footprints, nothing. The troopers searched the surrounding forest. Nothing. Eventually, they found Daniel's phone inside the car. There was only one new photograph on it, a photograph that nobody could explain. Investigators examined the photograph. It showed the old forest road. Mile marker 17 stood beside the trees. But the photograph appeared strangely old. The colors were faded. The image had the appearance of a photograph taken decades ago. Investigators checked the metadata. The date made no sense. It was October 14, 1998. The same date connected to the three missing hikers. The investigators searched old records. They found something disturbing. On October 14, 1998, a ranger had reported seeing a man beside mile marker 17. The description matched Daniel. But Daniel had been only 4 years old in 1998. Nobody could explain it. The investigators enlarged the photograph. Daniel was standing beside mile marker 17. He was staring directly at the camera. But the photograph had been taken from inside a vehicle. That meant someone else had been there. Someone had taken the photograph. They examined Daniel's face. He looked terrified. Then they noticed something behind him. Between the trees stood the woman in the gray coat, and behind her were the three missing hikers. The same people who had disappeared in 1998. The investigators searched the photograph again. Then they noticed something in the darkness. A second road. A road that wasn't visible anywhere else in the forest. 1 year later, another driver was traveling through the same Pennsylvania forest. It was almost midnight. As he drove through the trees, he noticed someone standing beside mile marker 17. A man, motionless, wearing a dark green jacket. The driver stopped. He rolled down his window. "Do you need help?" The man slowly raised his head. It was Daniel. His face was pale. His eyes were completely black. Daniel looked directly at the driver. Then he whispered, "Whatever you do, don't take the road behind me." The driver looked past him. There was another road behind Daniel, a road that hadn't existed a moment earlier. The driver stared at it, then looked back at Daniel. Daniel was gone. The driver's headlights suddenly went out. He looked toward the passenger window. A pale face was staring back at him. Then came 3 slow knocks. Knock, knock, knock. The driver turned toward the road. The woman in the gray coat was standing there. Behind her were the 3 missing hikers. And deep in the Pennsylvania forest, another car had just arrived.